Hey everyone, it's your guy back with another deep dive into what's really happening across the Pacific. We just got word out of Myanmar that's absolutely massive, not just for that region, but for global energy markets. And honestly, for how we here in the United States need to think about strategic competition in Asia. So grab your coffee, settle in, because this one's a doozy. And we're going to break it down piece by piece, leaving nothing on the table. Right, as Myanmar's leader, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, was finalizing his travel plans, an itinerary for a high-stakes visit to Beijing, the Myanmar government dropped a bombshell, a brand new energy discovery that could literally reshape the energy landscape of Southeast Asia and send shockwaves through global natural gas markets. And the timing, let me tell you, it's way too precise to be a coincidence. It's not random, it's a calculated chess move, a textbook example of geopolitical signaling. And there's a whole lot more beneath the surface than just oil and gas numbers. This is the kind of move that, as Americans, we should be paying very close attention to because it directly affects the balance of power and influence in a region that matters enormously to our own strategic interests. Now let's dig into the actual data because the numbers here are genuinely staggering. Myanmar just confirmed 4 giant natural gas fields in the deep water zones near the Irrawaddy Delta and the Tanantharayri region, which is down in the southern part of the country near the Andaman Sea, the 2 main core blocks alone. When you stack them together, hold proven reserves that exceed 106 trillion cubic feet. For those of us who think in more familiar units, that's over 3.1 trillion cubic meters. To give you some perspective, according to BPS 2024 Statistical Review of World Energy, which is essentially the gold standard for global energy statistics, Myanmar's entire previously known natural gas reserves totaled only 0.42 trillion cubic meters. That means this single discovery more than septuples, yes, 7 times, the country's entire proven gas reserves. Think about that for a second. One exploration campaign just multiplied a nation's resource base by a factor of 7. That kind of jump immediately rockets Myanmar from being ranked somewhere outside the top 30 globally all the way into the top 12 gas holders worldwide. And if they keep pushing exploration in those deep waters, and there's every indication they will, breaking into the top 10 is absolutely within reach, which would put them in the same league as some of the world's major energy players. But here's the thing that really gets the attention of anyone who follows geopolitical maneuvering. And we here in the US should be watching this like hawks. It's not just the size of the gas field that's jaw-dropping, it's the brilliant, almost surgical timing of the announcement. Every single date feels handpicked for maximum political and strategic impact. The Myanmar president's office made this huge exploration result public on June 14th. And guess what? Just one day later, on June 15th, Min Aung Hlaing was already wheels up, heading to China for his official visit. That's just the obvious layer on the surface. Dig a little deeper, and it gets even more interesting. The core Tanantharayri block, the one holding over 95 trillion cubic feet of that total, was actually leaked way back in December 2024 by BBC's Burmese service, which reported on some preliminary exploration data at that time. At that point, the Myanmar government stayed completely silent. No confirmation, no denial, no comment whatsoever. They sat on this massive resource card for a full 6 months without breathing a word. They didn't issue press releases. They didn't brief journalists. They didn't give any hints to the international community. And then, out of absolutely nowhere, they released all the detailed data and confirmed everything literally the day before the big trip to Beijing. You really think that's accidental? Of course not. In the world of high-stakes diplomacy, there's no such thing as a coincidence like that. Put yourself in their position for a second and think like a strategic planner. If you make the announcement after the visit is over and the delegation has returned home, that's just routine diplomatic follow-up, a standard post-trip summary that gets a few headlines and then fades away. But if you walk into that meeting holding a massive resource chip and lay all your cards on the table before the talks even begin, that's not just a goodwill gesture. That's a power move with real leverage. That's an unmistakable signal to your negotiating partner. We've got something you need. We know you need it. And we're putting it out there as a sign of serious commitment and good faith before we even sit down at the table. It's a carefully prepared entry ticket for cooperation, a diplomatic offering that says Myanmar is ready to do business on terms that benefit both sides. Myanmar fully understands that it sits on incredible resources, but to actually monetize them, attract the necessary investment, and break out of its domestic development traps. Looking around the world, there's really only one reliable partner that can make it happen. And that's China. They played this move with clear-eyed awareness and strategic foresight. And we in the West need to recognize how sophisticated this calculation really is. So now, the obvious question from an American perspective, and I'm sure many of you are thinking this right now, if Myanmar has trillions of cubic meters of natural gas, why isn't it knocking on the doors of us or European energy giants? Why choose to lock arms so tightly with China instead of looking for Western investment, technology, and operational expertise? After all, American companies have some of the best deepwater technology in the world. There's nothing blind or emotional about this decision. It's pure, hard-nosed pragmatism. And every layer of logic is rooted in real-world constraints, historical baggage, and cold-eyed calculations of self-interest. First and most critically, the existing China-Myanmar natural gas pipeline has suffered from severe capacity underutilization and a persistent supply gap for years and years. The newly discovered fields are essentially the only realistic solution to fill that hole, and they fill it perfectly. Many of you who follow this space know that China and Myanmar have built two cross-border energy trunk lines, one for oil, one for gas, which serve as critical energy arteries for China's southwestern region. These aren't small projects. They're billion-dollar infrastructure megaprojects that represent decades of planning and investment. The crude oil pipeline went fully commercial back in 2017, creating a direct new route for Middle Eastern and African crude to enter China, allowing massive tankers to bypass the congested and highly vulnerable Malacca Strait, a choke point that every American strategist knows is one of the most critical maritime passages in the world. Instead of threading that needle, they offload at Myanmar's Kafue port on the Bay of Bengal and pump the oil straight through to Yunnan province, dramatically improving the security and efficiency of China's crude oil imports and reducing their exposure to potential naval blockades or regional conflicts. But compared to the smooth-running oil pipeline, the gas pipeline has had a much rockier history and has never lived up to its full potential. That gas pipeline was completed and put into operation way back in 2013, with a designed maximum annual capacity of 12 billion cubic meters, a true national-level energy superhighway designed to carry a massive flow of natural gas. Yet for years after it went live, the pipeline operated in an embarrassing state of chronic underutilization, like a massive freight truck hauling just a few boxes while the engine roared at full power. In the early years, because upstream gas supply from Myanmar's older fields was simply insufficient, the actual throughput was far below its design capacity, leaving the pipeline operating at a fraction of what it was built to handle. More recently, though, with demand for natural gas exploding in southwestern China, driven by industrial growth, urbanization, and environmental policies that favor gas over coal, throughput has risen significantly and continues to climb, according to public data from PetroChina's Southwest Pipeline Company, which operates the Chinese side of the system. The China-Myanmar gas pipeline delivered 10.32 billion cubic meters for the full year 2024. Throughput had already hit 9.67 billion cubic meters, putting it well on track to exceed the previous year's total. The flow meter data at the Ruili entry point, that's the first station on Chinese soil where the gas crosses the border, tells an even clearer story. In the past 6 months alone, it has hit the design ceiling of 12 billion cubic meters 3 separate times, meaning the pipeline is effectively operating at or near full capacity for extended periods. That means existing pipeline capacity is essentially maxed out, but now the problem has flipped. It's not the pipeline's capability that's the issue anymore. It's the upstream supply side that's failing to keep up with demand and failing badly. And where does that failure trace back to? Entirely to Myanmar's side of the border. Since the political upheaval and military takeover inside Myanmar in 2021, Western sanctions have never let up and have only intensified over time. The European Union put Myanmar State Oil and Gas Company on its targeted sanctions list in December 2022, restricting financial transactions and technology transfers. And the United States followed up with additional, more comprehensive energy sector sanctions in October 2023, effectively barring American companies from any new investment or operational activity in Myanmar's energy sector. Under that dual pressure from both sides of the Atlantic, global energy heavyweights like Total of France and Chevron of the United States, names that everyone in this industry knows and respects, pulled out of Myanmar entirely, abandoning their long-standing operations and selling off or shutting down their assets. Those foreign exits didn't just reduce investment flows, they took with them the core capital, cutting-edge technology, and established operational management systems that Myanmar's oil and gas sector had relied on for decades to maintain production. Ever since those international firms packed up and left, Myanmar's older, more mature gas fields have seen production decline year after year, dropping at about 3% annually, with overall supply capacity steadily shrinking as reservoirs are depleted, and no new investment comes in to maintain output. By April 2025, the situation got so bad that the Yadana field, Myanmar's longtime workhorse gas field, and the backbone of its entire gas production, actually had to temporarily shut down operations because underground reserves were so depleted and production capacity had collapsed so dramatically, making an already tight supply situation even worse and sending shockwaves through the regional energy market. So on one hand, you have the pipeline running at near full capacity and screaming for more gas, and on the other, you have older fields bleeding output year after year with no relief in sight, a classic sharp supply-demand mismatch that was only going to get more acute over time. And this newly discovered 3.1 trillion cubic meter giant field fits perfectly into that gap, like the missing puzzle piece that completes the whole picture. At the pipeline's current capacity, this new reserve could keep the system running at full throttle for decades to come, fully revitalizing that long underutilized energy artery, and finally realizing the strategic value of billions of dollars in infrastructure investment that have been sitting there waiting for this exact moment. Second, the technical barriers for deep-sea oil and gas extraction in ultra-deepwater environments are simply staggering. There's no way Myanmar can develop this on its own with its current capabilities, and there's no Western company willing or able to step in given the sanctions regime. When you look around the globe, there's really only one country that has the proven capability, the specialized equipment, the skilled workforce, and the financial firepower to take on a project of this scale and complexity. And that's China. Let's be clear about what we're talking about here. All of Myanmar's previously developed gas fields were in shallow, near-shore areas with limited water depth and relatively simple geological structures, making extraction fairly straightforward and low risk, something even mid-tier energy firms could handle with off-the-shelf technology. But these four newly discovered giant fields are all located in water depths exceeding 1,500 meters. That's ultra-deep water territory. And the extraction difficulty goes through the roof compared to anything Myanmar has ever done before. Now, a lot of folks might not fully grasp what 1,500 meters of water depth actually means in practical terms. We're talking about pressures that can crush conventional equipment, temperatures that challenge material science, and logistical nightmares that require specialized vessels and subsea robotics. Globally, the number of countries that can pull off deep water production at that scale with a proven track record is extremely small. The United States has advanced deep water technology. Sure, our companies pioneered much of this, but American equipment and services are prohibitively expensive. And more importantly, with the sanctions regime firmly in place, U.S. firms aren't touching Myanmar with a 10-foot pole. The legal risks alone would keep any major American energy company away. Norway knows the shallow North Sea plays inside and out, but lacks the deepwater operational experience for this kind of environment. Brazil has significant experience with pre-salt fields off its own coast, but large-scale production at 1,500 meters with complex subsea infrastructure and long-distance transport isn't really their strong suit either, and they don't have the spare capacity to take on a foreign project of this magnitude. That leaves China, which has methodically developed a world-class, battle-tested, ultra-deep-water production system over the past decade and has already proven it can deliver. In June 2021, CNU's Deep Sea Number 1 megafield came online in the South China Sea, shattering foreign technology monopolies and signaling a major leap forward in China's deep water capabilities. That field operates in maximum water depths beyond 1,500 meters, with well depths exceeding 5,000 meters below the seabed. In extreme conditions that push every piece of equipment to its limits, formation temperatures hitting 138 degrees Celsius, which is hot enough to boil water under normal pressure, and formation pressures over 69 megapascals. That pressure number, to put it in perspective for everyone at home, is roughly 1,000 times the pressure inside your typical household pressure cooker. It's an extreme testing ground for drilling equipment, subsea production systems, and safety protocols. and China's entire deepwater drilling, extraction, and storage technology suite now stands firmly in the global first tier. Fully capable of handling conditions that would have been unthinkable just a decade ago, they can independently develop ultra-deepwater giant gas fields without relying on anyone else's technology, which is a remarkable achievement. Myanmar, on the other hand, is still stuck in the shallow water era, no deepwater rigs. No experienced crews for complex geology and extreme pressure, no subsea robotics capability, and not even the basic capacity to handle exploration surveys on their own without foreign assistance. In this situation, the China-Myanmar partnership creates a flawless complementarity. Myanmar brings the scarce deepwater resource to the table, and China brings the top-tier technology, advanced equipment, and massive upfront capital required to make it happen. This kind of deeply integrated cooperation punches a big hole right through the Western sanctions regime that's been choking Myanmar for years. The US and European sanctions are essentially rendered toothless and irrelevant because when Western firms are legally forced out of the market, Chinese firms step right in and fill the void, and that's a strategic outcome that Washington should be paying very close attention to because it means sanctions aren't achieving their intended effect and may actually be backfiring. Now, let's zoom out even further because the strategic value of this cooperation goes way beyond just energy trade or commercial profits. This move effectively fills the last remaining gap in China's southwestern energy security architecture and fundamentally reshapes the entire country's import map in ways that have long-term geopolitical implications. For a long time, the Malacca Strait has been the critical jugular for Chinese energy imports. A narrow, congested waterway between the Malay Peninsula and the Indonesian island of Sumatra that every energy security analyst knows is a major vulnerability. As the world's largest energy importer, China sends over 80% of its Middle Eastern and African oil and gas through that constricted passage, making it utterly dependent on a single point of failure. In peacetime, everything flows fine and costs are manageable, but if regional tensions flare up, if piracy increases, if a naval blockade is imposed, or if geopolitical conflicts escalate with any of the littoral states, that key energy lifeline could be cut off at any moment by external powers threatening domestic energy security, industrial production, and economic stability across the board. That's exactly why China has been spending years and billions of dollars building diversified energy import corridors to reduce this single point dependency. And the China-Myanmar oil and gas pipelines are the absolute centerpiece of that diversification strategy. They're China's fourth major energy import route, running from Kyaukphyu on Myanmar's west coast, along the Bay of Bengal, across the entire country, through rugged terrain, entering China at Ruili in Yunnan province, and then spreading out to cover key southwestern provinces like Guizhou, Guangxi, and Guangxing, creating a direct overland energy link from the Indian Ocean all the way into China's interior, completely bypassing the maritime choke points that pose such a risk, according to authoritative data from Xinhua published through the official Belt and Road Information Platform in September 2024. As of August 2024, the China-Myanmar oil and gas pipelines had cumulatively delivered over 100 million tons of oil and gas combined, a huge boost for the economic development and industrial growth of those southwestern regions, which historically have been less connected to global energy markets than China's coastal provinces. But for a long stretch, the gas pipeline still relied on some seaborne gas supplements to make up for supply shortfalls, meaning it hadn't fully shaken off its vulnerability to maritime disruptions and still had one foot in the old, risky system. Once this newly discovered deepwater gas field goes into full-scale production and comes online, the gas can be extracted right offshore in Myanmar's waters and fed directly into the onshore pipeline system to China, completely eliminating the maritime transfer segment that used to be necessary. That dramatically shortens the overall supply chain, reduces transportation costs, and most importantly, minimizes exposure to naval blockades, regional conflicts, pirate activity, or external interference from any quarter. In practical strategic terms, it's like we're not just adding another route, we're building a dedicated energy storage depot right at the source with a secure overland connection that can't be easily interdicted. Combined with the already operational Central Asia gas pipeline, bringing gas from Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan, and the Russia-China oil pipeline delivering crude from Siberia, China's western northeastern. And southwestern energy import corridors are now fully formed and interconnected, creating a multi-point, diversified, and resilient energy hinterland that significantly reduces vulnerability to any single disruption. Yunnan, which for years was an energy-poor backwater province with limited access to imported fuels, is now poised to become the premier gateway for energy imports into southwest China. And the entire region's energy security wall is now solidly reinforced in a way that simply wasn't possible before this discovery. And make no mistake, this deal isn't just a one-way street for China's benefit, it's also a crucial key to unlocking Myanmar's domestic development deadlock and addressing its chronic economic and social challenges. Right now, Myanmar is the textbook definition of sitting on a gold mine but starving to death. It holds vast, high-quality energy resources. Yet it's crippled by chronic electricity shortages that hamper both daily life and industrial growth, creating a cycle of poverty and underdevelopment. In 2025, damage to Myanmar's national power grid from extreme weather events, combined with the sharp output drop at the Yadana field and other supply constraints, caused nationwide electricity generation to plummet, with a power deficit hitting 1,570 megawatts, a staggering shortfall for a country of its size. The direct consequence of that shortfall forced rolling blackouts across the country, factories shutting down production lines, hospitals struggling to maintain operations, businesses unable to function, and ordinary people unable to secure reliable power for basic needs like cooking, cooling, or running small businesses. The broader economy has effectively ground to a halt in many areas, and the lack of reliable electricity is one of the single biggest obstacles to any kind of sustainable development. The large-scale development of these new gas fields can directly attack that problem at its roots, providing a solution that addresses both the export and domestic needs simultaneously. Part of the extracted gas will flow through the pipeline to China to generate revenue and meet contractual obligations, while another portion can be converted locally into electricity through gas-fired power plants to fill the domestic power gap and stabilize both residential supply and industrial production. Better yet, Chinese companies already have extensive, proven experience with natural gas power generation projects in Myanmar. So this isn't theoretical or untested. Firms like Yunnan Energy Investment and Power China have successfully built and operated multiple gas-fired power plants across the country. Over the past several years, they know the local terrain, the regulatory environment, the logistical challenges, and the maintenance requirements. So China provides the technology, the equipment, and the operational know-how, while Myanmar leverages its resources to solve its power crisis, and both sides gain tangible benefits. This isn't a one-sided deal where one party exploits the other. It's a genuine, balanced mutual benefit arrangement, a true two-way street that meets the core needs of both partners. Now, let's take a step back and look at the sheer absurdity of the Western sanctions policy through this lens, because from an American perspective, this is a case study in unintended consequences. The United States and European countries originally designed those sanctions to isolate Myanmar, cut off its foreign capital and technology sources, suppress its military-controlled economy, and force the ruling junta to bend to Western demands on human rights and democratic transition. But the actual result on the ground has been the complete and total opposite of what was intended. Sanctions haven't strangled Myanmar or brought it to its knees. Instead, they've effectively cut off every feasible pathway for Myanmar to work with Western firms, pushed the country firmly and exclusively into China's orbit, and accelerated the very strategic integration that Washington was supposedly trying to prevent. The US and European energy majors are now terrified of even looking at Myanmar because of the legal and reputational risks involved. And after the foreign exit from the Adana field, years went by without a single international energy major daring to step back in and take over the operations. Meanwhile, Russia is focused on its own domestic and Central Asian energy projects and doesn't have the deepwater expertise or the spare capital to get involved here. Southeast Asian neighbors like Thailand, Vietnam, or Indonesia simply lack the technical depth equipment inventory and financial scale to handle an ultra-deepwater mega project of this magnitude. So globally, China's the only one with the complete package. Battle-proven ultra-deepwater technology from the Deep Sea No. 1 project, the financial muscle to absorb tens of billions in upfront investment without blinking, and an existing, fully operational pipeline running directly into China's interior that's already hungry for more gas. Extraction, transport, And monetization, the whole value chain is already locked in and ready to go. Western sanctions didn't stop the project or punish Myanmar, they handed China an exclusive. Unchallenged opportunity to deepen its energy foothold in Southeast Asia and strengthen its strategic relationship with a resource-rich neighbor. From our perspective here in the United States, that's a strategic own goal of the highest order. A policy that not only failed to achieve its stated objectives, but actively advanced the interests of our primary geopolitical competitor. That's something we should be thinking very hard about as we review our approach to sanctions and engagement in this part of the world. Looking at the broader strategic picture, Myanmar played this hand with remarkable clarity, sophistication, and strategic foresight that deserves recognition. As a country long isolated by Western sanctions and largely shunned by mainstream international capital, with limited options and few friends on the global stage. Myanmar didn't really have many viable paths forward to achieve its development goals. Leaning on China, leveraging Chinese technology, investment, and market access to unlock its own vast resources and break out of its development trap is pretty much the only viable path forward that offers any realistic prospect of success. This 3.1 trillion cubic meter gas find is far more than just filling a pipeline gap or adding to energy stockpiles. It's a strategic game changer on multiple levels. It completely seals the last remaining vulnerability in its southwestern energy security layout. Dramatically reduces the chokehold risk of the Malacca Strait that has haunted Chinese planners for decades, brings its multi-pronged energy security strategy to full operational reality, and builds a rock-solid energy foundation for industrial upgrades, economic development, and stable growth across the entire Southwest region. From Myanmar's proactive willingness to put its cards on the table and signal cooperation before the formal talks, to the technology resource synergy between the two sides, to the full-scale upgrade of the regional energy map and strategic balance. This cross-border cooperation has long transcended the narrow confines of commercial logic. It's now a key focal point in broader geopolitical maneuvering between major powers, a big one that will have ripple effects for years to come. And as the China-Myanmar gas pipeline gears up for full, stable, long-term operation at maximum capacity, multiple provinces across China's southwest, from Yunnan to Guizhou, Sichuan to Chongqing, and beyond, we'll see comprehensive upgrades in both industrial and residential gas supplies, with stability, reliability, and availability greatly improved across the board, inevitably triggering explosive growth across upstream and downstream industries that depend on affordable and dependable energy inputs. All right, that's the full picture for today, with every angle covered in detail. This story is still evolving in real time, and the strategic ripples are going to spread far and wide across global energy markets and geopolitical calculations. I'll be watching it closely, analyzing the moves as they happen, and I'll keep you posted on everything that develops. Stay sharp, stay informed, think critically about what's really going on beneath the surface, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.